All right, welcome to today's episode of the Australian Lawn and Garden Podcast, which very well may be the last episode of the Australian Lawn and Garden Podcast. But it's not. I just put that. Sorry for freaking you out. But I knew I was going to have the title of the future of the podcast, and some people would go, "Oh no, it's not an oh no episode. It's a good episode." I've got some cool news coming up about the future of the podcast because we've got some very interesting, exciting, and potential things to happen. And I wanted to record this episode because I want your opinions. So I'm just putting this out there because I want comments. I want so comment on YouTube, comment on Spotify, comment on the Facebook and Instagram posts that we put out for these episodes. Put them on there because I'm going to talk about a bunch of cool stuff coming up. And do you like the ideas? Do you not like the ideas? Because if you don't like the ideas, some of them are expensive. And I'd prefer just to not do it if you're not going to like it because it's not for you, the listener. If you're driving, please don't type messages or anything like that. If you're working, obviously do that sort of stuff. But don't forget, if you're halfway through something important, commenting might not be quite as important, but it still is enough to remember. So I'm literally putting this out there because I want your opinions. The podcast isn't ending. It's doing quite well. But here's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about Makers Month that's coming up next week. Next week we're recording them. It'll come out very soon. That's really cool. I'm excited for that. We've taken it to the next level this year. I'll tell you about that in a second. I want to ask you, do you want to do, we'll talk about this later, call-in episodes where literally we are live and you can call in and ask questions and it wouldn't be just me. Like, could we get a lawn expert on and you can call and ask lawn questions? Would you like a business expert? Like a business coach, Darren, or something like that, call in and you can ask questions. Is that something that's possible? Are you going to be working and not answer? We'll talk about that later because it's expensive and a lot of it comes down to money on this sort of stuff. But there's all this sort of stuff that we'd like to do. Live events, do you want more of those? What's your thoughts on the sponsorships that we've been doing? What's your thoughts on if we release some merch? What's your thoughts on what are your favorite episodes? What do they cover? All sorts of stuff. So we'll keep this episode short, but let's get into it. First thing I'll tell you about Makers Month. So Makers Month, last year, if you're a new listener to podcast, last year we did 15 sit-down episodes, internet calls like we normally do. And we talked to a bunch of brands about their tools and what they had coming out. And it was really quite well received. It was really quite popular. But there was a massive problem. The massive problem is that they were internet calls. And so even though we had like 3 or 4 or 5 like episodes in the top 10 on the podcast charts for the home and garden category, I felt like we could have done better. And what we've done this year behind the scenes is I'm very excited about this. I'm going to announce all the brands we've got and we're going to announce what we're going to do. We are doing every single one of them in person with a cameraman, and we are doing 3 episodes in Perth, but I'm actually flying with the cameraman to Melbourne, and we are filming. Here are the brands: MoMaster, Cress, Makita, Greenworks, both their 60 and 82 volt range, Bush Ranger, Gravely, BA Pumps, Toro, Skag, Ego, Husqvarna, and Felco. So basically, almost all, if not the best, almost all of the best like products or tool manufacturers in this industry have jumped on in-person stuff. There's going to be some brand new release stuff coming out on camera, professional cameraman, high quality video, that sort of stuff. So starting filming that in a week. It's going to be nuts. We are aiming for an episode a day for, is it 14 episodes, 14 days, something like that. So, it'll be intense, but they'll be shorter as well. Last time they were sort of an hour to an hour and a half. We're trying to make them short, snappy. We're going to edit them, make them clean, crisp, all that sort of stuff. But 35, 40 minutes on average, maybe a bit shorter for some, bit longer for others. But that's the goal. So I am super excited by that. Now, last year we did it for free for all the brands. Clearly we couldn't do that for free, but we tried to keep it reasonable because we wanted as many brands as possible. But every brand, so for transparency, every single brand is paying exactly the same dollars because I wanted to be fair and equitable. And it's really just covering the costs that need to do this sort of content. But get excited for that. Now, what that means is that I haven't done a single one of those yet. So the first bunch of comments you can write is for those brands. What do you want me to ask? Do you want some spicy, controversial questions? Is there just maybe you've been using a certain tool from a certain brand and they're going to release something new to replace it and you've got some ideas. You want me to talk to them about it? Put them in the comments. First thing, I'll tell you the brands again. MoMaster Crest, Makita, Remax 60 volt and 82 volt, Bush Ranger, Gravely, Bear Pumps, Toro, Skag, Ego, Husqvarna, Felco. Tell me your stuff because I'm here. I feel like what I'm doing is I'm helping with this series, helping people make better purchases because they'll be able to see all the tools on camera, not in the sort of edited way that you get when the brands release it themselves, in just an honest way from an Australian perspective, because you can get these shows in America, blah, blah, blah. You get the idea, not quite relevant. So I want to be as helpful as possible. Any questions, chuck them my way. The next thing I've got to ask you after the Makers Month, give me your opinions. The next thing is, we've been doing a bit more what I'm calling in-person podcasts. Obviously, the tour made that a little bit easier because I was on the road and there's some interesting places around the country. But the places we went to, like gyms, like Roy Gripsky and Sons, where we did the GA spares and looked at Bush Ranger and all sorts of stuff, those videos did really well for this niche, for the podcast niche. And the listening on the Spotify and things like that, the numbers were about the same. So my thing is that the people listening seem to like them, even though they're video form. And I'm trying my best to make them informational enough that you can listen without needing to watch. But I want to get your opinions because I really like making those episodes. Problem is those episodes are quite expensive to make. I was already in the area on tour, so that made it simpler. But you can imagine once you put in flights, and some of them you need a cameraman. Once you put in flights and a cameraman, you're talking thousands of dollars to do a single episode, which means that if you like those sorts of episodes, we are going to need some way of funding it. So do you like watching them? Do you look forward to whenever you see an episode like that? Do you go, oh, this is exciting? Or do you just go, no, the internet call stuff is what I actually love. I really love that kind of stuff because I don't care either way. I like doing both. But I do get excited about the idea of doing more of those ones. But I've got to go get sponsors and you got to get some sort of income from it. Otherwise, it can't be done. So there's a challenge to it. And if you come back to me, you go, oh, we don't care that much. And then go, okay, well, let's not put in all that effort for the challenge. Do you like the in-person stuff? Do you like those tools? We actually got a video coming out. We've done one here in Perth because there's a problem. There's a lot of interesting stuff in Perth, but there's heaps of interesting stuff across the country. So you want to cover it all, then you got to go flying. But in Perth, we did a video. This will come out next week. It is a facility that makes 70 million seedlings a year. And we went through the whole process, how they get the soil, everything. Right, growing it from seeds, the automatic seed planters, the temperature-controlled rooms for germination, the grafting, everything, and yeah, anyway. I found it very fascinating. About 70% of all vegetables grown in Perth, or certain types like lettuce and strawberries and stuff, are ultimately originating at this place. So, so when I said Perth, I mean Western Australia. So, anyways. That's that. Do you like more of that? What's your favorite type? Now, the next thing I want your opinion on as well is call-in episodes. I saw Tim the Lawnmower Man doing this, and I had thought about it. I kind of thought about it for a long time because there is a feature in the software that I use that has this ability. You need to buy some other hardware and stuff like that. So it wouldn't be free. I'd have to spend some money. I thought it would be cool to do call-in episodes, but I don't want to do call-in episodes with me solo. I guess we could do that. That's not necessarily, I'm not against it, but that wasn't my idea. My real idea is, would you be interested in doing call-in episodes with expert guests? So somebody like a lawn expert, or a business expert, or a hedging expert, or something like that. And we would advertise it beforehand, and we would go live, and we would accept calls from listeners. I'm not sure how that would work exactly, but one of the things that I think we might need is we might need a third person to filter calls and run a switchboard, because that's what they do on radio stations. Is that necessary? I don't know. Probably, maybe. I don't know. We'll see. But we've got to set some stuff up. I think there's some great potential in that. I really do. But do you think it's a good idea? And if, because you might go, oh, it's a great idea, but are you really going to call when you're working? Especially if you've got to wait 5 minutes for us to answer because we're talking to someone else and you've got to stay on the line. And but yeah, would you pause your workday and wait on a call to talk to an expert and ask them your own questions? Because I feel like that could be the creme de la creme of helpful episodes, to get a soil expert on and just get people to ask about soil, to get a hedging expert on, to get somebody in that. So talk to me, tell me your opinions. Again, like, I want to hear them now before I put all this effort in and then nobody calls up because nobody was really interested. You just don't know. And then the next thing is live events. We did the podcast tour this year, but in this previous 12 months, we did the podcast tour, and I'm thinking about the next 12 months, thinking about 2025, because believe it or not, we're like pretty much 5.5 weeks from Christmas and the new year. So in 2025, how many of you would like to do those live episodes? Because we get last year, for those who don't listen, we did Perth, Adelaide, Melbourne. We did a very small event in Canberra. We did Sydney, Hunter Valley, and Brisbane. And we actually did another episode in Perth with Brenton Klein, just a small thing in this warehouse here. There's a few thoughts I have on this. The number one is that the effort to make them is quite high. It's quite a lot of effort. And it was really easily justifiable for me because we wanted to do a family holiday anyway. And so if you were to look at the tour as a return on investment perspective, it wasn't a great return on investment. But if you look at it from a family holiday experience perspective, it was fantastic. But we're not going to do that. We're not going to take 2 months off for family holiday every single year. So the thought would be to do sort of spot episodes, not a tour in itself, where we could say fly to Sydney on my own, not with the whole family. I'd fly to Sydney, we'd do an episode for a night and fly back. But again, the cost of those events is thousands of dollars per event. If not, depending how crazy you go, could easily cost $10,000 to do a single event. Like, trust me, you can spend that money very, very quickly with these events. So is that something that people are really interested in? Because if you really wanted to get to the last tour, but you couldn't, and you were hoping that we'd do another one, let us know. If you're like, it's nice, but it's just, I prefer to listen while I'm in the car, while I'm mowing lawns, cutting hedges, pulling weeds, slinging mulch around, that kind of thing. So if you want more, we have the ability, we have the contacts. A lot of the brands were happy with it last year, so we could call them up again. But maybe you guys don't care that much, so that's another question. So the live events there. And the other thing that we were thinking about, and this is a much more iffy thing to happen, I'm thinking about doing a 1 or 2 small business focused events that would go for multi-day. Now, they would be really expensive because multi-day events like that are incredibly expensive. To hire out venues, $10,000+ more for certain places like that. A conference is kind of what I'm talking about, multi-day conference. But the idea would be to bring in people who have really good business experience in the lawn and garden scene. So not like the live events that we did where it was just like sit down and talk, but to do multiple sessions where you might go, here is somebody who runs a business with 200 employees in this industry. And here's someone who grew their business. That's one talk or one Q&A. Next, Q&A is somebody who did maybe they grew their business from, whatever, you get the idea. Like they're doing $1 million a year solo, or they're doing something, they're doing in immaculate work, and you want to get those types of clients, and we get 4, 5, 6 people in, and it's a multi-day thing. People fly in, there's a hotel, and it's kind of this whole thing, and it's this intensive thing, and it's there to help people to grow their business. And if that was the case and we could do it, we would need to charge hundreds of dollars, if not close to $1,000 per ticket. And you might go, that's a lot of money. Trust me, there's not much profit in that. Because when you start talking about that sort of stuff, when you got to fly speakers into a venue, you've got to pay their, them what they're worth, and people who are doing really well in business, for them to come to an event like that, they're saying no to a lot of higher value things. So they're, put it this way, for you, if you're earning $100 an hour, and I come to you and I say, can you come do an event for me? I need you to say no to 2 days worth of work. Well, you're like, well, I'm doing $800 a day. That's $1,600. And then you've got to do flights and accommodation and food. Even someone who is pretty moderate in business to be fairly compensated to take 2 days off work would be in the thousands. So you can see how you add that up with expensive everything, venues, speakers, PA. For an industry like this, where you're not going to get 1,000 people rocking up, the cost is going to be very high. Because I'd expect this to be a 20, 30 people thing, which should be fantastic when it comes to the helpfulness of those 20 or 30 people. But you can imagine where that money's going now. Maybe you get 50, I don't know. So that to me is more unrealistic because of the cost side, but it is something that I actually believe would be super awesome to do. And maybe, just maybe, there is actually enough interest out there, and I'm well underappreciating the interest. And so tell me if you think that sort of thing would be cool. It would probably be Eastern States, right? I've actually thought as well, WA contractors, this is so much easier. I've thought about doing something like a full day thing here with Darren, who's obviously here. And I've got some other people in mind. I won't tell them, I won't say because I haven't talked to them about it, but I have talked to Darren. I was like, could we do a full day here event at the warehouse? Obviously just drive in, park in, intensive, get catering, but yeah, it's cheap because it's my warehouse. I already pay the rent, don't have to pay anything more. People in Perth, you get the idea. So, but this big event, so that'd be another thing as well. WA contracts, if you're interested, let me know. But the other side of the event that we could do would be going over east, doing it proper. So let me know your thoughts. Now, is there anything else that I wanted to talk about? Oh, yes, there is. Sorry, what are your thoughts on the sponsorships? I've been, let me take a drink. I've been really proud of the sponsorships that we were able to get this last year. When you talk about the live tour, when you talk about Toro, Hustler, Lawn Culture Australia, those sorts of brands, obviously Lawn Shed, the course is my own course. But being able to go to those brands and get those sponsorships is a big deal, because every single one of those brands didn't have any podcast sponsorship before that. And so we obviously are doing something great in the industry, or great enough in the industry for them to want to do sponsorships. But I always struggle with it because it's hard to balance the, what would you call it? I'm not an ambassador. And I'm not interested in ever becoming an ambassador for a brand. And the reason is that when you become an ambassador, I feel there's very few people who do it well enough that they don't seem like they are just telling you that that brand is great because they're paid. And there are some people out there who are balancing that. And I'm not painting everyone the same brush, but I don't believe that I could do that. Because my honest opinion, just saying it straight out, is I don't think there is such a thing as one brand that is the best at everything, right? Even with brands that they don't really have, like they're making tools where there really aren't that many competitors, right? those brands might say, well, we're the best at this, but they're really only the best at that because they've niched themselves into such a strange and weird space that they're the only ones who's making a tool for that. So you could accurately say, yeah, they're the best technically, but it's not helpful for the audience because there's not that many people who need that solution, if that makes sense. And those brands don't have money, not like the more universally used ones. So when we do an ad, it's hard for me to I don't want to alienate people and be like, these Toro battery tools are great, and they are. I like them, but they're not for everybody. But I think, for example, from Toro's perspective, that they are not talked about enough in the contractor pages. A high quality brand like Toro doing work, I think people should go and get their hands on them and go and try it out and consider it and think about it before they make their next purchase, because there's certain brands out there that they get talked about a lot, and there's certain brands that don't get talked about that much. And it's just kind of, sometimes it's just the luck of the draw. It's a first mover advantage. Some brands have been around for hundreds of years, and so we're going to talk about them anyway. Yeah, that's the idea. So, but it comes across as if, it can sometimes come across as if it's like, oh, this is the Luke Smith approved purchase. Well, it is in a certain way Luke Smith approved, but it's also, I'm not upset if somebody buys something else. And so it's hard to balance that sometimes. And, with Hustler as well, I'm wearing my Hustler shirt. Hustler sponsored podcast. I use a Hustler, and I've been using them for, it's getting close to 10 years now, and I really like them. And I'm really glad that they came on and sponsored the podcast. But does it feel a little bit pushy sometimes? Do you care? Do you not care? Is there other brands that we could do for sponsorships? Because here's the thing. We're not going to stop doing sponsorships, because there's this thing called money, and you need it to do this. And I've talked about this 100 times on the podcast, where the people who make the content in this industry do not get the advantage numbers because it's a niche down industry and there's just not that many people interested. You're not going to get that many numbers on a lawn contractor or professional podcast series where we go deep dives into things. And because of that, you can't charge that much for sponsorship, which means you kind of have to sponsor every episode to make it worthwhile. And you might notice that, like, we didn't do an episode for last week. Here's the truth. We've recorded one podcast in a month and a half. Right, because we batched them all together, and then I've got to go work, and I've got to run my business, and we've got this really cool thing coming out in a month. I've been working on it for, it's a software thing. If those who listen to every episode, you might have heard that I've got this little software thing working in the background. It's been almost 5 years. It's 4.5 years, and we're almost ready to launch it. And that's been insane, the amount of hours. I think I've finished at 1 a.m. 4 out of the last 7 days just to get that done. So what I'm getting at is, the reality of life and running businesses is that you have not a whole lot of free time. And when you have family, and we've got 2 kids and stuff like that, to sacrifice time to make a podcast, which I love doing, but that doesn't earn me any money, is a very difficult decision at certain seasons of life, spring being one of them, right? So you got to balance that right. So sponsorship is required to essentially pay people to help me get the podcast done. So to balance it all out, if I can do 3 times as many podcasts if I have an editor. Editor costs money, and that's the reality of it. So I hope that I explained that well. To summarize it up, things cost money. And in the same way that you might like mowing lawns and you might love cutting hedges, at the end of the day, you might do 1 or 2 for free because you love it. But at the end of the day, you're going to have to buy cereal and milk and do that sort of stuff. And that's where we're at. So we need, the big point is we need sponsorships. But brand sponsorships are not something that I'm ever against doing, especially when they're brands I support. But I wanted to know what your opinions on them, because we could do things. We could lean more into the things like the Patreons, selling merch. We haven't done that before. Doing other forms of kind of content creator funded things that are not external brands. And I've got no problems with like I said, doing the external brands, I'm just wanting to hear your opinions. I feel like maybe I've shot that down a little bit more in how I've explained it than what I really feel about it. But I'm just thinking from your perspective, how do you feel? Would you prefer to have like some creators do this? I don't really know if I want to do it, but like have the podcast behind a paywall for the first week. And so we release an episode with Tim the Lawnmower Man or something like that, and people on Patreon get access to it a week early, and then we release it out to the public. So there's models like that where you can get some sort of income. But anyway, it's a challenging one. So share me your thoughts. There is no such thing as a wrong opinion, and then we'll go from there. And you know what? If you've made it this far, let me tell you this little secret about this software thing we've got coming up. How much do I share? We've been working on this thing. So when I was back in 2020, well, 2019, I was very healthy. 2020, I had a sharp decline in my physical capacity due to an illness I have. And in that season, I started making software solutions to solve some of the management problems I was having with my staff. And they ended up being, obviously I'm biased, but they ended up being very helpful, very good, and useful for solo operators too. Like they were the things that I wish that I had made when I was solo on the road. We've been making this software solution. I'm not going to tell you too much more than that. We are so close to releasing it. We have a full team that's been working on it. It's been years of development because we were just using it in my business, Silverstone Gardening, and we started making something that was really good for us. And we were going to have it as a secret weapon that we weren't ever going to share because it was that useful and that powerful. But then my granddad, who you would have listened to on episode 99, he goes, "Why don't you make that into a software solution for other businesses?" And I was like, "Yeah, granddad, nah, it's too powerful. I like keeping it secret, But then that idea sort of stuck in a little bit, and it took about 2.5 years after he said that for me to go, "Oh, maybe I should." And then start doing some maths, and you go, "Damn, it's going to be insanely expensive to make this and incredibly time consuming." So, but we've been testing that with some contractors. As contractors signed NDAs and things like that around the country, other people have been using it. Elliott's just coming back in from work, so we do run our actual business, and he's carrying Tyro battery gear. So there you go. But we've been working on that. We've been trying to make it so it's going to be super useful for businesses across the country, and that's almost out. They're almost ready for it. So you guys listen to the end, and well done for making it that way. And so share your opinions, write them in the comments, write them in Instagram, Facebook, all that sort of stuff. And everybody, I will see you in the next podcast.